Okay, I get a little so great. So good morning. I think so far for everyone signed on, it actually is morning, and I'm on your side of the world for once, so I don't have to be too confused about the timing. But welcome to this webinar, Self-Care for Emotional Well-Being. For those of you who might be watching the recording, if I am not known to you, my name is Dr. Molly Kaufman. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine, an essential oil specialist, a yoga and meditation instructor, and an international retreat leader. Um, Really, the long and the short of it is, I mean, those are all the titles, right? And those are, I guess, necessary in our society to understand that someone's educated and, get a sense for what their endeavors are. But I would say if I were to encapsulate what I feel like my life is about, um, all of us as human beings encounter challenges inevitably. That's just a natural part of life. And I feel incredibly fortunate to have, from a very young age, have had teachers and healing experiences and more teachers and more healing experiences that have tapped me really deeply into what I believe is the truth of life, that life is beautiful and life is meant to be enjoyed. And while there are challenges and there are moments where we kind of disconnect from that beauty, or we feel momentarily disconnected from our ability to navigate in the realm of happiness or joy or even contentment and peace, I believe the ultimate truth of life is that state, that inherently being alive, that we are really meant to feel happy and to feel content and feel well adjusted. And hence the topic of today's lecture, not really a lecture. So because I was so lucky to have so many wonderful experiences, I feel like it was the natural segue to dedicate my life to facilitating in all the ways that I can for others to find the same experiences and truths and healing opportunities that I have had. So, in short, again, I just feel sort of like my life is a big pay it forward, because I feel incredibly fortunate about what has come my direction and continues to come my direction. And so, as much as I possibly can, I just want to continually pay that forward with the hopes that I can kind of weave others into the many opportunities that exist to kind of pull us and draw us back to our innate right, which is to feel good, which is to live as part of life as, happy, content, well, with our health, with our integrity, with all of those things. And of course, as a retreat leader, as a yoga instructor, as a doctor, I'm looking around the world right now and seeing that we're really struggling. We're having a hard time. And that doesn't mean that there aren't good moments, right? Because I think that there are always good moments. There's always the silver lining we can find. But I think in general, we're having a really hard time. Would you agree? That there are just moments where, just like it kind of all feels too much. And one of the reasons for this, I believe, is just the way society has evolved. And that is part of the collective. We all hold a part of the responsibility of the human experience, but the vehicle of society is a very powerful one. And many of you who maybe have done other retreats with me, right? We often touch into, sometimes it feels actually like a reachable goal to change ourselves or to change our habits or to change our eating. But then when we exit our own little individual bubbles and we start to confront life all around us, and it doesn't look like the choices we're trying to make, it's hard, right? It's hard to balance that. Like, okay, I feel like I'm doing the right things, but then I exit my house or I exit my little bubble, or, wherever your safe space is. And we're confronted with a lot of powerful voices, energy, also just the way that life goes that isn't necessarily helping to support us in this direction. So, a couple of things. One, for me, community is foundational. So, the fact that you're here today, I appreciate it so much. But what I want to say is you've already given yourself the gift of connection, because we do live in a relatively isolated way, a lot of us in modern life. And that also doesn't contribute very easily to maintaining a healthy state. And for those of you who may have been on a retreat with me, you know that this is kind of part of it, is just the being seen in whatever state we happen to be in. And I think it's also very much a part of the human tendency, especially when we don't feel good, to retreat. And I don't mean retreat like go on an awesome retreat in Switzerland. I mean like to retreat into ourselves, into our safe spaces, and be like, okay, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to interact because I feel icky. And in actuality, when we look at the wisdom of the human experience, that's exactly the moment that we should be reaching our hands toward one another and be like, hey, look at me. Can you reflect back to me this very real human experience that I'm having? And so the topic today feels relevant based on what I'm seeing. And I also just want to say, when we get into the realm of emotional well-being, this webinar in and of itself is not intended to be medicinal. It's not intended to be diagnostic. It's not, you might, as you're listening to it, you might have insights about your own experience. That would be the hope. But with emotional well-being, there are also very real times and moments in our lives where we do need facilitation, where the self-care topic might not be enough. And so if you're ever in question about whether you're in one of those moments or not, please also reach your hand out. Reach your hand out to me, reach your hand out to the community. We hold so many free community spaces where you can pop in and ask questions and be seen. So I just want to make that designation that sometimes in the realm of emotional well-being, we do need facilitation. We do really need like one-on-one, can you guide me? Because I'm so lost that even all these self-care things we're going to talk about today might not be enough. So do your best as well to just remember that connectivity, that community piece, that we are communal creatures. And although there's a lot of life that is, lending itself to like self-sufficiency, and I've got to do it myself, and I have to survive, and I have to do all these things. You guys are familiar with that, right? Like there's so many voices telling us we're supposed to be strong by ourselves, independent, all of this stuff. And that has this, that serves in moments, that serves us in particular moments in life. But in general, it doesn't really serve us so well when we're talking about well-being. Connection is really the place where we find the deeper healing and the deeper adjustments. So before we get going, because that was already a lot of talking, and I know we're few on the call, so I'm going to do my best to also just leave time at the end of the call if you want to check in. But I'd love to share with you one of my favorite things to do when I'm feeling emotionally overwhelmed. It's a tiny little exercise. It'll take us maybe 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. So if you'll indulge me, if you're wearing shoes and you can just quickly slip them off, that would be great. And if you're in a place where you can stand up, go ahead and stand up. So because the topic is self-care, and I'm going to try to do it with my headphones without toppling anything over, right? We're just going to start out with something that when in those moments you arrive in that place where you start to feel your body tighten or you start to feel that sense of overwhelm, you just get yourself in a safe space. I don't know, close yourself in a closet if you're not by yourself, like all of this stuff. You stand up and spread your feet really nice and wide beneath you so that your stance feels steady. Relax your arms, relax your shoulders, and maybe even have a little shimmy to kind of start feeling into the whole body. And since you're muted, you can either even do like the like sound making, because it's a way to kind of clear tightened, blocked energy from the body. Great. Now just find a moment of stillness. See if you can lift your 10 toes. I'm going to do it with my fingers so you can see. Lift your 10 toes. See if you can spread them apart from one another as wide as you possibly can. Doing it with your hands actually helps. And then just relax your toes down to the ground. And now do it with your hands, only your hands, or if you want your feet to do it again, really spread your 5, 10 fingers really wide, like spread through the webbing until you almost feel that like weird stretching feeling. And now with your fingertips, just flick, 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 flick a couple of times. Flick, 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 flick. Okay, great. Drop your arms to your sides and just start to bounce your body. Bounce, bounce, bounce. So you're bending and straightening your knees, but just like as if you're standing on a trampoline, and let your body loose. No one's watching you. This is like fine. Close your eyes if that feels good and just bounce like little bounce, 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 bounce. And as you're bouncing, really relax every part of your body. Relax your legs, your hips, your abdomen, your low back, your rib cage, your shoulders. Relax your arms, your wrists, your hands are flopping. Your neck is soft, your head is soft. And just for another few moments, bounce, bounce, bounce. And while you continue to bounce, can you drink in a big deep breath and then let it go? Continuing to bounce. Do that twice more. Big deep breath. And let it go. Keep bouncing, keep bouncing. Big deep breath. And let it go. And at the end of your exhale, just come to stillness. You're probably feeling some electricity in your body, and then go ahead and take your seat again. So sit yourself back down, just kind of gently. And then in finding your seat, go ahead and close your eyes again for a moment. Take another nice big deep breath in. And a really complete, forgiving, trusting breath out. And then let the breath be normal, just moving in and out at its normal volume and pace for this moment. Start to do a little scan of your experience right now. Now, starting from the tips of your toes and taking your awareness, your imagination on a gentle scan up the body from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. And along the way, just notice if you encounter any sensations. And as you begin to notice, try not to label or describe what you find, just notice. It could be actually an emotion that's lingering with you right now. It could be a physical sensation in the body. It could be something just like you think it's there, but you're not even sure what it is. Just kind of scanning from toes to top of head. And then wherever it is that you sensed the most loud or significant sensation right now in this moment, take your awareness there. And do your best to just imagine that that sensation is energy. And if the mind wants to label and describe it, do your best just to soften away from that and come back to this sensation is energy. And then for a few more deep breaths, just send your breath to that place, to that energy. And just kind of do your best to watch and listen and breathe, and sending your breath to that place where you feel sensation. The sensation is energy, and you're breathing with it for a few moments. Great. And then take another nice deep breath in. Just release the concentration on that area of your body or that sensation. And as you exhale, feel your jaw and your shoulders relax. And do that once again. A big deep breath in. And just soften, and relax as you exhale. And then when you're ready, you can flutter your eyes open and come on back. Great. How do you feel? Did that make you feel a little bit different? Did that change the sensation of your moment a little bit? A little bit. Oh, hold on, Robin. I'm gonna ask you to unmute since I see you want to. I think I just asked you to unmute. You can go ahead and share. We're few,
It
so yeah.
just, I can step, but I always, as soon as I'm awake and not focused on relaxing myself, I step back into my state of mourning for my country, my imperfect country, and dismay from my friends who have really good government jobs doing real work, and dismay from my friends who are different.
Hmm.
Maybe they're lesbian, maybe they're gay, maybe they have gay or lesbian children. I just step back into that. I'm just like angry.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is it's a very international community as well, and so there are very real things happening in a lot of different places. And one of the things we'll talk about today is also that is just to like be being willing to be with what is real for you in this moment. And then also just the practice of returning again and again, something like anger can be very blocking, right? It can be very damaging. It's actually one of the only emotions in traditional Chinese medicine that we say is a little bit dangerous, actually. And it's very real. It's a very real emotion. And as we get started, I mean, actually, of course, I have a PowerPoint presentation, which we'll kind of flow through because I think it's nice to see some of these things as well. And it also keeps me from going down too many rabbit holes, which I very easily do when we get into conversational mode. But what I love about what you said, Robin, is that you're very clear on your current state. And in the beginning, like sometimes it is more clear. Sometimes we experience emotion so strongly that we become a little bit deer in headlights, right? It's so paralyzing that we're not even sure what it is. We just know we're uncomfortable. And then that uncomfortable kind of, like freezes us and untethers us from all of our centering and grounding as a human being. And then we inevitably start to act and interact with the world from that place. And that's when emotions start to get a little bit tricky. So let's dive into it. Overwhelming and numb. Yeah, exactly. Overwhelming and numb is another way. So let's dive into it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And then again, I'm going to flow through this according to what seems nice. I'm going to try to do it in a timely manner, and then really happy to take some time at the end as well. So self-care for emotional health, and again, just being mindful to designate that sometimes we do need assistance, sometimes we do need to reach for external facilitation. And the reason that I really wanted to present this topic is that I think that when we do get into those states of overwhelm, or we do feel something as strong as anger, right, kind of governing us and pulsing through our veins, usually for a very good reason, or we get in that kind of frozen state, it's very easy to forget that we can intervene for ourselves. It's very easy to forget. And in fact, one of the slides is this simple, is identify that we need something, right? Pick the something and then do the something, right? Like self-care for emotional well-being in a nutshell can be that simple, but it's really nice to be reminded and also, again, reach out to community. And more or less, that's what I feel like today's presentation is all about, is just to remind us, hey, we're actually really more empowered than we think we are. And if we want to keep navigating the world in the healthiest way possible, we need to bring a little bit more resilience and determination to use the tools that we do already have in place that are really easy to take better care of ourselves. So I love this quote: the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They most must be felt with a heart. I feel like anyone who reads this quote is like, yeah, but then the state that a lot of us are in are like, I am feeling so much in my heart that I don't want to feel in my heart anymore. Anyone with me? Do you kind of feel into that? You're like, whoa, like my heart is overwhelmed. My heart wants to shut down. My heart is leaking. I'm crying all the time. I can't, like all of these places where we're like, wait, Mayday, forget it. I don't want to think with the heart anymore, right? Like I don't want to feel into life with the heart anymore. But the truth of this is that even in traditional Chinese medicine, the part of our soul that interacts with the external world, the Shen, is housed in the heart. And in all of the ancient traditions, from Taoism to Buddhism to the yogic traditions, we define the mind to reside in the heart, which is why something like this has such significance, and which is also why when we get overwhelmed emotionally, we feel completely disconnected to our intuition, to our ability to move forward, because in essence, it really is like the heart gets very congested. And so, hopefully, over the course of the next half an hour, we can untie a little bit the process to the point where we can maybe remember to intervene for ourselves a little sooner in the process to hopefully not arrive in those places of such overwhelm so consistently. And this is really what lends itself to more unstable, like mental and emotional things. So, the first thing that's really important to remind us is that emotions are normal. I feel like, as I mentioned in the beginning, unfortunately, the way society has evolved, we're really taught and conditioned in a lot of weird ways to not feel what naturally comes to us when we feel it, right? We have to keep going. We have to present ourselves in a certain way. We have to remain poised. We can't be angry. We can't beat up our cushion. We can't, like all of these things that tell us we're supposed to somehow stay composed. Well, normal human life isn't meant to be like that. Back in the tribal days, there were, like dancing and drumming circles, and there were gatherings on a regular basis where people could scream and shout and move their bodies. Like we just, that simple bouncing is something so powerful to kind of tenderize the nervous system and get a little bit of the stagnation that comes with strong emotion out so that we can bring ourselves back into a state of presence. But we no longer have things built in to our societal traditions that allow us really to feel. And so, what is inevitably has happened, what I see across the board is that we're like trying everything in our power to avoid our emotions, which means that we're either repressing, right? And often, what repressing our emotions or like swallowing our emotions, what ends up happening is when that person takes your parking spot in the parking lot, you're in your car cussing them out. I mean, whatever, someone took your spot. It's actually not that big of a deal. But what ends up happening is that then our emotions compost inside. They get really gooey and, turn into things that they weren't meant to be. And then they come out sideways because things got to come out of our body. Otherwise, we get really sick inside. And so it's a good reminder. And here is a really beautiful emotion wheel. Maybe we can repeat. I've done a webinar in the past on emotions according to traditional Chinese medicine, which I think can be really powerful as well. But today I just want to re-empower you with some of the things that you already have in your toolkit. And the first thing is just reminding us that emotions are a normal part of human life. And in fact, we could say that emotions are how we interact with life. Almost everything is an emotion, right? When we have a conversation with someone, when we look at a sunset, when we eat something delicious, all of that, what are we doing? We are interacting with that experience with an emotion, which is why the wheel has so many variations of emotion on it. So our emotions should be a very normal and natural part of our day to day. And so what would emotional health mean? I really love this image. I think it's a little blurry, unfortunately, but it's like, right? Like we are nature. So also just all of these images of like rooting down into life in a really healthful way where our roots are nourished, our center is nourished so that we can really just like leave ourselves open to the totality of experience. And what does that mean? What it really means is that what we would aspire to do in a state of emotional well-being is to express the right emotion in the right moment, meaning when the emotion comes as a response to whatever it is that we're interacting with, we're able to express it. And what that does is allow us to stay in harmony with the natural truth of life that everything comes and goes. And we'll talk about some of the ways we get tripped up here, but just to give some foundational descriptions of like, so what would emotional health look like? Emotional health would look like someone makes you angry and you're like, hey, you're making me really angry. Right? I mean, just think about it on that simple level, how much we swallow our emotions, even in interpersonal interactions, right? Our inability, like we're all so congested in a way that it's even hard to. And I can give my own example. I had an encounter yesterday that really made me angry, and it wasn't it was so angry that it was like a little overwhelming for me. So I disconnected myself from the situation. I went for a power walk and then I came back and I said, hey, this is making me really angry, right? So it's just like, again, intervening in the right way to allow us to be really real and honest. And again, Robin, that's what I love so much about what you were sharing before is just like being in contact with what it is that you're feeling and then also, right, knowing how we can facilitate its healthful process so that we don't remain anchored in those states of emotion either. Okay. So, because this is also about self care, I'll just do this really quickly. Like, why do we even need to title self care? Well, the long and short of it is the velocity of life, the immediacy of life, everything that I've already described about how society is not so supportive of us taking care of ourselves mean that we are not taking very good care of ourselves. It's just a general truth. I look out around the world and I see so many, from eating processed food. I mean, I could give so many examples, but really the truth of it is right now we're not taking great care of ourselves. There are many reasons for this. And if we don't take care of ourselves, then everything else that we do in life is going to be a reflection of our disordered state. And this can also come in many levels. But the reason I want to mention just this more specifically is that I think a lot of us somehow have gotten the notion that taking care of ourselves is like a treat, is self-indulgent, right? I'm not in love with the self-care movement, I have to say, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna indulge in this thing that's a treat. No, really, self-care means you are looking after yourself to make sure that you're healthy. That's it. You know what I'm saying? And like the other stuff, I'm not saying you can't have niceties in your life, but even that, in my opinion, has gotten really distorted. Self-care is not a treat. It's not selfish. It's not self-indulgent. If you are not well, everything that you do is going to be a reflection of your not wellness. I know that was not a proper English word, but that's the way it came out. And so taking care of ourselves should be the first and foremost thing, like drawing back to if I'm well, then everything else that I try to do is going to be a reflection of that. And if I'm well, all of the things that I'm responsible for, I'm going to be more capable to do. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. And so a lot of times we tend to neglect ourselves just because of all of this messaging or, like the self-worth issue and all of this stuff. So I just want to make it really simple. You have to water your own garden. I always joke, I feel like I just did this on a webinar and it's coming to me again. So I'm going to share it again. The airlines got it exactly right. Secure your own oxygen mask before you help others. Because how good are you going to be at your job, at taking care of people, at doing whatever it is that you're aspiring to do in a spirit of service in life if you are crumbling? That's not going to work. It's not sustainable. So we have to really tend to our gardens for no other reason than just simple respect for life. And it's so beautiful because the science says that when we take care of ourselves, actually, like when we just are willing to know that we should take foundational care of ourselves, it benefits almost every system in your body, from mental health to physiology to how we sleep to how we interact, et cetera, et cetera. So if you need the scientific backup, it's there. taking a few minutes every day, or 10 minutes or 15 minutes every day in a self-care routine actually has physiological benefits, mental health benefits. And so, again, I think it's just like foundational. The foundational part of life is that we must look after ourselves. We must. And of course, the current system is like, just put a band-aid on it and you'll be fine. This is true for physiology, unfortunately. It's true for a lot of our modern approaches to medicine, but it's also true for our mental and emotional well-being, as I was describing, right? It's like, oh, you feel sad, but you can't feel sad because you're expected to present yourself in a certain way to the world, or you can't take time out, like whatever it is that those demands are. I'm going to invite you again and again to give importance to them when they come up. Because the more band-aids you put on your natural emotional response to life, the more things are either going to come out sideways or begin to cause real damage in the system. The other thing that I really want to make clear is that although today is a little bit oriented around like when we end up deer in headlights, right? When we end up in those moments of overwhelm, what are some things that we can easily reach for? And it is equally as important to be taking care of ourselves on a daily basis when things feel good, as it is to be taking care of ourselves when things feel challenging. And it's sort of the difference between like sustaining a state of being and improving or evolving in a state of being. And it's a little bit beyond today's topic necessarily, but I really want to make this designation because self-care shouldn't just come in the times when things feel challenging. Self-care should be daily, whether you have a yoga practice, a meditative practice, right? That should be installed in your life every day so that you are building the resilience, the determination, and the awareness to recognize when a bigger intervention is needed. So in general, in the like self-care realm, we kind of I like this check-in a lot. And while today we're specifically going to be talking about kind of like the emotional realm, I feel like this is a very simple self-care practice that you could do every day just as a self check-in. Again, the velocity of life, like sometimes we even feel like we don't have a minute to just know how we're feeling in any given moment. And so often when I work with people one-on-one in holistic health coaching, I say, print out this page and put it, where you have your morning coffee or your morning tea or whatever, and just like have this be one of the first things that you do each day. Physically, how am I? And if there's something there, is there an action I can take to rectify that, right? Like any small thing. Oh, I didn't nourish myself great yesterday. Okay, today I'm going to be more attentive, whatever that might be. Emotionally, how am I responding to life? Like just checking in. How am I doing emotionally? And should I do something today with awareness to assist myself in that process? Socially, are you connecting? Again, this is so vital because we are living in a more isolated world. And I actually just attended this magnificent medical symposium in San Diego. And of course, many of you know too that I have a particular interest in gut health and the microbiome, just because so much of science is backing up what we have been sharing in traditional Chinese medicine for so long. But just one quick thing, if you happen to live alone, it's very interesting because apparently there's a study that shows that people that live in groups have stronger immune systems than people that live alone. Because when we hug, when we hold hands, okay, so not spit on each other, but I mean, like there are little, we know from COVID, right? That when we talk and like there's an exchange, right? All of this exchange of molecules is helping to diversify our microbiome, which is where about 70% of our immune system originates. And so if you happen to live alone, I know for me, I'm alone a lot of the time. It's like when you're with people, hug them, touch them, get connected. If you feel like you've been on your own too much, like reach out to a friend, something, but definitely connect, because that social connecting actually helps the integrity of our system on a foundational level. And we know that when the foundation of our system on a physiological level is stronger, we're much more capable to handle all of the other things. and spiritual. Just checking in. Are you connected with something greater? And again, this doesn't have to mean like, do you believe in God? It doesn't mean that like, oh my gosh, I was raised in a religious thing that I have abandoned, but I don't know what I believe. It's just like maybe it could be nature. Maybe it could be like I am just like reminding myself that I'm part of this, beautiful macrocosm of the microcosm, that nature, that there's this big, beautiful harmony to nature that I'm part of. It could also be that simple, just kind of checking in, a recognition that we are a very important and vital piece of the bigger picture. However, that definition is going for you in this moment. And then again, before we kind of jump into some of the self-care interventions and just sharing with you some of the tools that I've built in my toolkit over the years, from yoga, meditation, traditional Chinese medicine, coaching, etc., is what we really aspire to do is to identify that an action is needed, meaning when we start to feel off, when we begin to understand like, who my emotion feels a lot, that in that moment, as soon as we can recognize that that moment is arriving for us, we choose an action and we act. So much of the time, we're like, okay, like, oh, this is a lot. And then we keep going. And then the next thing comes and it's a lot. And then by the time we're intervening, there's so much to unpeel, right? Has anyone had that? I mean, we're all human. So even myself, I do my best to live according to what I teach, of course. And then there are moments where I also, have to be reminded of all of these things. So I saw everyone shake their head, right? It's so easy with the demands of life to just like keep going, keep going, keep going. If we can, as our sort of number one aspiration, to just get closer to the beginning of something, like, oh, I feel the sensation in my body, or oh, I feel my brain tightening, or oh, I feel a little tightness in my chest. We choose like we say, okay, let me pause for 1 minute. And sometimes that's all it takes. Choose an action and do the action. Don't just choose the action. That's also very tantalizing. Like, oh, I know what to do. And then you just keep going. Choose the action and act. And in this way, we start to reintegrate into the very real experience of emotions in life. So we'll start with one of like like a very easy place to start. And again, just kind of monitoring. So as we go through these few handful of things, I'm not suggesting that you do all of these all the time. Okay, what I'd love for you to do is just kind of like, as we're doing this scan of possible things that you can do to assist your emotional experience in any given moment, kind of like let land the things that resonate with you the most, or, oh, like I love walking and I forgot I love walk, like whatever it is, just kind of clue into those messages as well that your body and mind gives you as we go through this. It's not a checklist, nor is it intended that you're going to do all of these things all of the time, because that would create its own kind of stress. So movement, right? When we experience emotion, it is distributed in every cell of the body. And one of our very first responses to especially strong emotions, but emotion in general, when we're not in a state of awareness, or when we've cultivated the bad habit of trying not to feel, is that the armor comes intact, right? Like a transformer, like Iron Man, right? It's like tuk, 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 like the whole body tenses, whether we're aware of it or not. And so movement is such a great, it's sort of like the little thing we did at the beginning here. Like you just like, sometimes I just stand up and shake a little bit when I start to feel overwhelmed, or I start to feel that sense of ick and I need to keep going. I stand up and shake a little bit. If you're able to, walking is such an enormous gift of a medicine in the human experience. But walking without your device, walking without, right, an extra interaction, even if it's just like walking around your apartment building or your home or the block, it doesn't have to be long. It just has to be movement, because when we bring our body into movement, we give it the opportunity to not move into that fight or flight tension, right? We give ourselves the opportunity to stay in flow so that it's easier for us to recognize, I'm having an emotional response. Okay, let me do my best to let it flow. Does that make sense to everyone? Dancing, like having random dance parties, are also a wonderful thing. Just turning on a favorite song. Maybe I'll share with you when I share the recording of this. There was a dynamic meditation that I created for my 8-week intro to meditation course. That's a really nice way too. It's a little bit longer, but even just like putting on okay, not a breakup song, not a song that's going to bring more emotion, just like whatever, a salsa song, like a non-connected emotionally song that inspires you to move, and having a little dance party. And what I did this morning, where I am, because I'm experiencing also a week very full of emotion and stress, is I went for a walk. I actually did bring my device on airplane mode and I played a Zumba playlist and I dance walked. I danced while I was walking, and I will tell you, it was so cathartic. It was so wonderful just to get the heebie-jeebies out, right? Like just to make sure that the armor doesn't settle in and keep us from interacting with what is real in any moment. Also, kind of what we did at the beginning of the webinar is just like checking in, maybe not even necessarily trying to name the emotion, but rather saying, where do I feel this in my body right now? Is it in my chest? Is it in my stomach? Is it in my back? Is it in my head? Just where, like when you start to feel something, just pausing, taking a few breaths and checking in with your body. Where do I feel this in my body? And then, just as we did so simple this morning, is just feeling it as energy, not as a thing. Don't name it, don't define it, don't rationalize it, don't try to discover what childhood trauma is leading to your current state. Just feel the thing as energy and breathe with it. That's it. Okay. And then always remembering that it doesn't have to be intense to work, right? A gentle walk, a little dance party, some mindful movement, if that's what you're into. Roll out your yoga mat, do a couple sun salutations. It doesn't have to be big to be functional. It just has to be. We just have to act in the moment that we need the action. Breath is kind of the next level where our body and our experience as human beings takes a hit when we are having an experience of emotion. One of the first things we do when a strong emotion comes is we tend to hold our breath, or our breath gets more shallow, or our breath gets more rapid. So even just being again able to recognize, like, oh, I'm, starting to feel in a state, you lower your shoulders, you close your eyes, and you take 5 or 10 deep breaths. It's great medicine for the moment. But again, it's your willingness to do it. It's your willingness to recognize, like, feeling a little overwhelmed. Okay, pause. And this is where at the bottom of this slide, you'll see the mindfulness bell. Some of you have done programs with me where I use the mindfulness bell. Honestly, if you are feeling right now in a general state of emotional overwhelm, I might recommend that you download this app and you just set it to ring throughout the day. We kind of do this when we're cultivating mindfulness in general, when we're doing mindfulness exercises. But it can also just be a really useful reminder. The mindfulness bell is something that happens in ashrams, also at, Plum Village, and in so many of these mindfulness environments. And the reason why is that it is recognized that all of life is changing around us all of the time. So no matter what state of presence or calm or contentedness that we get ourselves into in any given moment, when we start interacting with the world again, it's very easy, right, to start getting pulled and distracted and everything. And so having something ring periodically throughout the day and just choosing, like maybe when the mindfulness bell goes off, you play a 4-minute song and you have a dance party. Or maybe when the mindfulness bell goes off, you just take 10 deep breaths. But it's also a way to keep this like self-care cultivation as part of your day, and to have a sweet little reminder of like, oh yeah, I'm taking care of myself. Oh yeah, I'm taking care of my well-being. Does that make sense to everyone? So you can also just like literally install reminders into your day to remind you that you're trying to take care of yourself and to remind you not to let the overwhelm get the best of you, but to also remind you like, oh, wait, I have a lot of tools here. Nature. We are nature. Okay, so there's a high level of toxicity in life right now on all levels, from our food to our medicines to our environments to our relationships to, like so many things. If you have the means by which to connect with nature, it is really good medicine. There's something called earthing. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. If you haven't, it's like cobble squatting, I think is what another name of it is, like getting your bare feet on the earth, not the cement, on the dirt or the grass or the moss or wherever it is, the nearest by park that you have, getting your bare feet on the ground. There's actually an exchange of ions that happens that helps the nervous system, that helps the circulatory system, that helps thereby also your mental and emotional state of being. So this is also something very easy, completely free, right? Hopefully there's some piece of nature nearby that can be either part of your self-care routine or can also be an intervention in those moments of overwhelm. If you can't think of another tool, you can always just retreat to nature for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get your bare feet on the ground. Forest bathing is another science. It's actually not that new, but it's becoming more popular now, right? Showing that when you get into nature, also the different types of ions in the air of a forest. And by forest, I do mean, like the more natural remote places, which might not as easily be accessible to you, but just to know, right, that there is a lot of now science, again, supporting what we've known in the holistic traditions for a lot of years, that nature heals. And so if you can get yourself to nature in any way, hug a tree, be that person, sing a song, do your dance party in the park, it might actually give other people the invitation to like take care of themselves too. You never know, right? Just like be that person who does the thing in honor of your well-being. Don't be afraid to do it. So in any way possible, get outside. And here as well, significant evidence showing us that the more time we spend outside, the more diversity we tend to have in our microbiome. And so thereby the healthier the physiology is. And when the physiology is healthy, the easier it is for us to take care of our mental and emotional state. We're going to get a little deeper into the process, but I just want to plant this seed, the seed of changing language. And this is something that you can build an awareness. It takes practice. And sometimes it also takes practice with the accountability of another person. But there's a lot that we do. Words are powerful. And there's a lot that we tend to do with language right now that gets us stuck in situations that are not meant to be permanent. So moving from like attachment and labeling language to experience language. And what is the difference here is that when we say something as if it is true and permanent, we're kind of stuck in it and we forget that life is a continuum. But when we change our language to represent that life is a continuum, we're more easily able to stay in a conversation, meaning we're also more easily able to change the situation if we want to. I know that's a little nebulous, so let's go through these examples because I think they make it a little more clear. Okay, so here's a physiological thing, right? I am depressed versus I'm experiencing depression. You can even say them to yourselves and see if energetically it gives you a different sense, right? I am depressed. I am labeling myself. I am experiencing depression means that there's a possibility that I could also not be experiencing depression. Do you get it? It's very simple, but very powerful and very relevant for the world we're living in right now. Another one, and it's beautiful because we started our conversation with the experience of anger, which is a very powerful emotion and can also be, when we trap ourselves into it, very unforgiving and letting us go. So I am angry. versus I'm feeling angry. I have a lot of anger. I'm experiencing anger to keep ourselves in the conversation. Does that make sense? Another one that I really, yeah, another one that I really love is like adding yet at the end of conversations or the end of sentences, like I'm not feeling better. I'm not feeling better yet. I just opened the door of possibility. Or I could keep myself trapped in that I'm not feeling better. Does that make sense? And so as you continue to go along your day and your life, and just like the navigation of maybe starting to pay a little bit more attention to these different signals that life gives us, just in recognizing where you could change the language to keep the situation alive versus defined and stuck is going to be so helpful, because when you keep it alive, that means that we have energy to be in conversation with. And when we have energy to be in conversation with, we're able to alchemically change and shift and alter that. Okay. Responding versus reacting, and I'm just checking the time really quick here. Responding versus reacting. So this also gets a little bit deeper into the philosophy, but I just want to present it today in this conversation just to kind of bring our awareness there, plant some seeds, and then as you are cultivating your practices, maybe this becomes more and more understandable in a real sense. But when we respond to life, ultimately what that means is that we are really seeing what is in the moment. We're taking enough of a pause or enough of a deep breath to interact with what is, rather than knee jerk react based on what has happened to us in the past. It's a little nuanced, and this is really where our daily practices can help us cultivate the ability to understand whether we're responding or reacting. But one kind of general tool here, or one kind of general rule, is that you take 1 to 3 deep breaths, or you count to 3 before you respond to anything, especially the things that are triggering, right? And I also want to invite you to be aware that you're not required to interact with everything. And I think that we're, again, a little bit conditioned right now, a little bit distorted in feeling like if something comes to us, we have to respond. And I'm going to use social media because I feel like that's a really great example right now. And then there are so many examples in our lives, right? Someone posts something that you disagree with. This is a general example so that I can make it a relatable, right? It's probable that something in your gut is like, oh my God, I have to formulate a response because that is just so distorted and not right. And this. I'm just going to say that you also have the choice to say, I don't really agree with that, and just continue on your day. That is a choice that we have, right? And it kind of like another example of that is like the red-faced angry person who gets up in your face and yells at you, right? Probably usually for no reason. You have a couple of choices. You can try to be loving, which often when someone's in that state is going to exacerbate it anyway. You can react by yelling back at the person, which is also probably going to make their state of being worse. Or you can just be still and let them keep their emotion in their sphere. Does that make sense to everyone? It's not always the right answer, but I do think we've forgotten that we don't always have to respond, that we don't always have to reply, that sometimes the right answer is just to step away and continue to cultivate what you believe to be right and continue to behave in that way to the best of your ability. Okay. And so when we get into the realm of responding versus reacting, we're really getting into the realm of pattern interruption. So, like becoming more aware of what triggers us to the best of our ability, to become more aware of like what our trigger reaction is, oh, when this topic comes up, that, like this is my normal response. And then seeing if there's a little space we can begin to create in between those two things so that little by little we create enough space that we have choice about how we want to respond to something rather than continuously being triggered. Does that at least make sense logically? And I know most of you know that I've been working more and more with the essential oils, and I'll just say that this is particular. I mean, in the emotional realm, essential oils can be amazing, but in the realm of pattern interruption, they are particularly amazing because when we start to recognize what is triggering us, if you have an oil in your pocket, it can assist, it can like catalyze and amplify our choice to breathe before we respond, right? It can help actually physiologically to change what's happening with your heart rate, with your respiration, with your even your biochemistry, your endocrine system within seconds to minutes to assist us in creating a larger space between trigger and reaction. And when we create that space with an ally or without an ally, we move ourselves back into the space where we at least give ourselves back to choice. We at least give ourselves back to, I normally react this way. Do I really want to do that? No, actually, this time I just want to walk away. And that becomes part of our practice. Does that make sense? Right. And again, these are just things that you have in your back pocket. And I will just comment that, the mindfulness practices, yoga, meditation, these are great daily practices to cultivate the ability to hone into this skill better and better and better. And then the very last thing that I'll mention as we kind of bring this particular discussion to a close is gratitude. There are a lot of ways to practice gratitude, and when you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, it might not feel very easy to feel grateful, right? Especially if you're feeling anger, especially if you're feeling frustration. It sometimes feels a little, like almost silly to be like, well, what is one thing I'm grateful for? But the science behind it is compelling, right? The way that it changes our brain, the way that it changes our heart rate, the way that it changes our ability to interact with the world. So I'm not saying that when you're in an emotionally charged moment, that you should think of something you're grateful for. This is more of a daily practice that before you go to bed, you have a journal next to your bed and you write one thing you're grateful for, maybe from that day, maybe in general, whatever that is, right? When you wake up in the morning, maybe that's your practice. You take some breathe in your palms, you take a couple deep breaths, and you write one thing you're grateful for. And that's your portal to entering the new day. But gratitude is really a compelling and profound practice in beginning to change the foundational tapestry of how we are able to integrate and interact with life emotionally. So, something very easy to incorporate into a self-care routine that will, over time, make us more resilient and also make us more capable to interact with emotion when it comes to us in the moment it comes to us and help us to express it in the appropriate way so that it can come, we have the experience, and it can also go healthfully so that we're not carrying a rucksack that's getting more and more burdened with a lot of stuffy emotions that we're not allowing ourselves to feel. I'll leave you with a couple of general practices, and of course, you'll get this PDF. This might be a good slide also just to print out. And again, here, the idea is that foundationally, if we take care of ourselves on a physical level, everything emotionally is better. If we're not well physically, if we're not sleeping well, if we're not eating well, if we're not hydrating ourselves well, everything is harder to manage emotionally. And so, just a sweet reminder that yes, while we are in the emotional realm for this particular discussion, and it's a very important realm to talk about and to learn how to, manage and be in a more healthful state, the foundation of that, like the foundation of our life, is our physical capsule. And so if we just pay a little bit more attention to taking care of our physical capsule, then the emotional conversations also get a little bit easier. So, a couple of general practices that I like to follow is to limit device use, right? If you think about it, what devices have brought to our lives is an increased amount of emotion, because every single thing that your eyes look at on your device, whether you're scanning Instagram, whether you're reading the news, whether you're right, like all of those things bring an emotional response to the body. And we are not built to handle 150 different emotional responses per day. It's coming fast, it's coming furious, and it's coming at a rate that is impossible for our psyche and our heart to digest. So, if you can eliminate a little device time, if you can start to resist the addictive urge to scan Instagram as a relaxation mechanism, your world is going to get better, because we are digesting too many emotional responses to too many things for no reason, really, right? I mean, I haven't met anyone yet that says Instagram has improved their life, even though we think it does. Like, oh, I'm bored. Okay, I'm just going to scan through stories. And I participate in these things too. So I do recognize the irony of me saying this. But what I'm saying is that if you can designate, right, certain times of the day, at night at 9 p.m., my device goes on airplane mode. And until I finish my morning practice and time to like go outside and watch the sunrise and breathe in some fresh air, it stays on airplane mode. So maybe that's an idea, but just giving yourself moments where you cannot be so moved by this. Um, oops, sorry, one second, guys. I realize I'm over time. So um, and okay. Okay, sorry. I have another meeting after this, but since we started a few minutes late, I want to make sure that we come to a completion. So I forgot to send them a message telling them, see, like noticing when it happens, do the thing, even though I'm interrupting our webinar. Excuse me for that, but I do have another meeting. So we're going to bring this to a close. Primarily plant-based diet. If you want to know more about this, there's so much stuff now on my YouTube channel, even the introduction to the Reset and Restore program. There's a lot around the energetics of this, and a lot of science showing us also the benefits of not ingesting meat. I'll just say, from the yogic standpoint, animals are emotional creatures. And so when we ingest meat, we are also sharing in the emotional experience of their life. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I am saying, like everything, if you're not doing that in moderation and you're not doing that with an awareness of the source of your meat, it's probable that you are congesting your system with more to navigate than you need to be. Going to bed and waking up at the same time, sleep hygiene is everything. And this seems like a simple thing, but it actually makes a big difference. And there are some really interesting psychology studies that show when we are sleep deprived, we actually start misinterpreting facial expressions, which means that how we're navigating the world emotionally is completely distorted. Isn't that interesting? And so, again, just returning to, like, maybe even forget navigating your emotions for a second. If you're not sleeping well, please tend to that. Please find some solutions for that, because if you get restful sleep every night and you improve your sleep hygiene, how you interact with the world is actually going to be more realistic and more honest and less stressful, because you will bring yourself back into real time instead of distorted interpretations of life. Detoxify your environment, tidy up your environment. In traditional Chinese medicine, the earth element is also part of our psyche. It's how we digest life. It also has to do with the emotions of like rumination, overthinking, which is also a very strong tendency for us. And one of the very simple practices for the earth element is just tidying up your space. Because the more tidy and organized the space that you're in is, the less the mind has to think about and navigate, which makes it much easier for us to really know how we're feeling on the deeper levels. When we're in a messy environment, when we're in a cluttered environment, it actually makes more fluctuations of the mind, and it literally doesn't make us feel good. And so that's another layer then of not feeling good that we have to deal with on top of all of the other things that are coming. So just tidy up your environment a little bit, and that's going to help. Don't take things personally. This is a big one, right? It's so easy when things are coming at us to take them personally. Do your best as much as you can. When people express their emotion or frustration to you, or do something or say something funny, just kind of cultivate and continue to practice that mindset of like, gosh, they must really be suffering. Doesn't have to do with me. Gosh, that those people must really be suffering. That doesn't mean you have to help them either. It just means like leave what's theirs in their sphere. Keep what is yours in your sphere. And the last two things, everything is energy. And I know we don't have time in just an hour webinar when we're talking about so many things, but again, back to that very simple practice of when you start to feel things and when the mind gets overwhelmed of like, I'm angry, I'm this, just return to like, where do I feel it in my body? And what is it as energy? Where do I feel it in my body? And what is it as energy? Right? And allowing it to be in its natural state so that we have the chance to transform it and to work with it and express it in a healthy way. And then the very last thing is do your best not to cause harm to others. Inevitably, we're going to get frustrated. Inevitably, we're going to feel anger. Inevitably, we're going to be tired sometimes. Inevitably, do your very best not to project that on others, because when we do, we're actually perpetuating something negative rather than just taking responsibility for it and being like, hey, well, since you're right in front of me, Marissa, sorry, I'm like, it's just coming to me. I'm like, hey, Marissa, I'm not feeling great today. So like, I'm just going to keep to myself because I don't want to run the risk of saying something to you that will be hurtful. I don't want to run the risk of, yelling at someone for no reason. I don't want, right? So just be mindful of whatever you do, whatever your state you're in. And again, I'm not saying to suppress the emotions. I'm just saying like, if you feel frustrated, do your best not to pour that frustration out on other people. Let them know how you're feeling, reach out, connect, all of those things, but do your very best not to cause harm to others as you go along. And then the very last thing to close is just remember that the grass is greener where you water it. Meaning, if you're housing a lot of anger and you're really focused on that anger, that's, like that's what you're watering. So just that balance between like, I'm angry and finding all the ways to help that flow and to help that process versus sticking in it and getting stuck in it, right? So water the self-care practices rather than the sensation itself. And that's what's going to grow is our ability to navigate the world more healthfully, emotionally. Okay. Okay. All right, gang. So I know I've kept you a few minutes over. Um, I hope that something in this last hour felt helpful, felt empowering, just felt like a good reminder, like, oh, wow, yeah, okay, I've got a lot of stuff. And then whatever it is, whether you print that checklist, even just like, how am I emotionally, physically, emotionally, you know, socially, spiritually, doing a check-in every morning, whether it's just like having a totem in your pocket or something visible or a little slip of, but like make yourself a fortune cookie paper that you put in your pocket that's like, go for a walk, or your mindfulness bell to remind you to act when you start to feel overwhelmed. Little by little, you're going to see the enormous benefit of this, and it's going to enable you to navigate all of the emotions that are coming to us more easily and healthfully. And of course, if for anything else, you're always welcome to reach out to me personally. Okay. Any last comments or questions before we sign off? No. Okay. Sorry, Robin. I'm gonna unmute you again because I see Marissa shaking her head, but go ahead and
Yeah, I just said I'll have to think about this. I have encounters coming up with family who I violently disagree with. And I live in Florida, so I'm used to being outspoken
yeah.
politically. You know, sometimes it just feels good to be angry, but I can't go punch the bag because I'm one-handed these days, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 So yeah, so I mean there
Yep.
is, it really changed my life when I was very young. Someone said, "Why don't you just go punch have you ever punched your mattress?" And I was like, "No, I'm not supposed to be angry." And she was like, "Go punch your mattress." So I put on like AC/DC or something. I hate, heavy metal, but I just like put on something that like helped me to get in touch with that. And I did the physical action, and it was quite incredible how much more
Cathartic.
capacity I had to handle the difficult situation after that. So again, the healthful expression of emotions. So you might not be able to punch, but like you put on some music and go like, dance walk or, do like go back to the dynamic meditation if you can do that, healthfully with your wrist. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it's all for your consideration and just to see if we can't harvest some extra tools in helping us to navigate. So
Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes.
okay, please do. And, please reach out for, just for camaraderie. Like if you need it, just reach out. Like that's
I hope you have a good day.
thank you.
Better
Thank you.
day.
Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Molly.
Yeah, I'm gonna just stop. Oh, I don't even know how to stop the recording.